Inventors often take an old product and improve it in a way never thought of before. But it's rare that the product being improved is more than 500 years old.
Yeah, not much has changed about parachutes since Leonardo da Vinci designed one back in the 15th century. But a New York entrepreneur inspired by a parachuting accident of his own is fast making a name for himself and his small company by revolutionizing what parachutes can do. High technology applied to the oldest, lowest technology still in use today. Smart parachutes that can fly themselves from an altitude of 35,000 feet and from a distance of 30 miles or more, and then land within 150 feet of a target. Their use is most obvious for the military, where dropping things out of planes is done a lot, but with techniques that haven't been improved much since World War II.
First few months in the war in Afghanistan, it was in the news several times that we actually did airdrops and missed Afghanistan. So, some sort of guidance technology is required if we're going to do high altitude drops.
Daniel Preston is an inventor / scientist / entrepreneur who's developing guided parachute technology for the U.S. military. He says that the traditional way of dropping troops or equipment at low altitudes works pretty well unless someone is shooting at you. And since Stinger missiles now cost as little as $3,000 and can hit a plane at 1,000 feet, it would be a lot better to drop things out of planes from a much greater and safer altitude. That's a much more challenging proposition, but it's one that Preston says his small company has met.
We build robotic parachutes. They have a small computer, a suite of sensors. They have accelerometers, gyros, magnetometers, barometric sensor, a GPS. A little computer runs through a whole bunch of algorithms to calculate where it is, where it wants to be. It controls some motors that basically warp the wing, same way the Wright brothers did it 100 years ago. And it controls the parachute to fly to just overhead of where the target is, and then it puts out a conventional round and drifts for a few seconds until it hits the target.
Preston's company is currently in its third contract with the Army, and some of Ater's products are already in military use, although he's not told exactly where or for what. Part of his design success comes from a new fabric he invented that replaces the familiar ripstop nylon, which is unchanged from 60 years ago. Preston has developed a bonded composite that he says is 70% lighter and 3 times stronger. In addition to the latest computer design software and simulation, Ater uses ancient sewing machines, the best ever made, according to Preston. They handcraft all the products they create, always looking for new ways to improve things, like stitching strength, which they can test right in the factory. Preston came to all of this quite by accident, literally. An avid parachutist, he broke his neck a few years ago when his chute opened too rapidly. He landed unconscious. Determined to figure out how to avoid that kind of experience in the future for himself and others, Preston set out to make a better parachute. One thing led to another, and eventually he was talking to brigadier generals about how they could deploy dozens of payloads from high altitude that wouldn't run into each other on their way to hitting their target. He calls it flocking or swarming, which comes from the words that describe birds and insects doing the same thing. Now, when Preston first approached the military, they thought his ideas were great and interesting and all that, but just impossible to achieve. So he had to prove them wrong by making his first guided parachutes with his own money. Now he's working on even more futuristic ideas, including a gliding surveillance device, which could stay airborne for 50 hours or more. And about that broken neck, because so many people ask him about that, to be clear, he walked around with it for 2 months because it was a cracked vertebra. But then, he was misdiagnosed, but then got the correct diagnosis, and it did create a lot of problems for him, which he took as inspiration to fix the problem that caused it. And look where he is now. He's got his own company based on that.
Not too bad. Now, for more on Preston's story, you can pick up this week's issue of Business Week magazine. And if you missed any of the segments on this week's program or want to see previous stories, you can log on to businessweekweekend.com.